Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. Do not be afraid, Mary, for you have found favor with God.
Let my people go. What then shall I do with Jesus?
Dry bones, hear the word of the Lord.
Behold, the Lamb of God, who takes away the sin of the world.
Lazarus, come out.
Cry louder, surely he is a god. Perhaps he is asleep and must be awakened.
Be strong and courageous, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go.
Saul, why do you persecute me?
You come to me with a sword, but I come to you in the name of the Lord of hosts.
Why do you seek for the living among the dead?
Choose this day whom you will serve. These are Nate's Bible Stories.
Welcome to Nate's Bible Stories. Today, we begin the story of Moses, the story of how God delivered his people from bondage in Egypt. God's rescue story doesn't start with miracles in the sky. It starts with suffering on the ground, and a baby nobody was supposed to let live. Moses, the Road to the Promised Land, Part 1, From the Nile to the Burning Bush, based on Exodus chapter 1 through chapter 3, verse 10. When Moses was born, the Israelites were slaves in Egypt, chains on their wrists, dust in their lungs, orders shouted in a language that was not their own. And if you know God's promises, you might wonder, wait, weren't Abraham's family promised the land of Canaan? So why are they here? Why are they trapped in Egypt? The answer begins with a brother named Joseph. Joseph had been sold as a slave by his own brothers, but God raised him up anyway. Joseph became a leader in Egypt, and when a famine struck the land, Joseph saved many lives, including the lives of his own family. So Jacob and his sons moved to Egypt. At first, they were welcomed. They were safe. They had food. They were treated with honor because of Joseph. But Joseph died, and time passed, and generations grew up who only knew Egypt as home. Then the Bible says something chilling. A new king arose over Egypt who did not know Joseph. It wasn't that Pharaoh had never heard the name. It was that Joseph was ancient history, a story from long ago. And this new Pharaoh looked at the Israelites, Jacob's family, and he didn't see neighbors. He saw a problem. They were many. They were strong. They were growing. So Pharaoh squeezed them. He forced them into hard labor. He worked them until their shoulders ached and their hands cracked. He pressed their faces into the dust and demanded more bricks, more building, more sweat. The Israelites cried out, but Pharaoh only tightened the chains. And when slavery didn't shrink them, Pharaoh chose something darker. He called the Hebrew midwives, the women who helped Hebrew mothers bring babies into the world. He gave an order so evil it almost doesn't sound real. When the Hebrew women give birth, he said, if the baby is a boy, kill him. If it is a girl, let her live. But the midwives feared God. They would not do it. And when Pharaoh realized his plan was failing, he made it even worse. He turned his command into a law for the whole nation. Every son that is born to the Hebrews you shall throw into the Nile. The Nile, the great river of Egypt, a river that gave life to their crops, became the river Pharaoh used to steal life from God's people. It was a dark time, a time when a mother's joy could turn into terror in the same heartbeat. And in this dark time, a Hebrew woman gave birth to a baby boy. She looked at him and felt something stir in her soul. The scriptures say, she saw that he was a fine child. Maybe she saw beauty. Maybe it was a mother's love for her son. Or maybe she simply saw the quiet fingerprint of God. She hid him for 3 months, but babies grow, and cries carry far. And one day she knew the hiding place would not be enough. So she made a basket out of papyrus reeds. She sealed it with tar so it would not leak. And with trembling hands, and the kind of courage only a desperate parent understands, she carried her baby to the Nile. Not to throw him in, but to set him down, to place him into God's hands. She laid the basket among the reeds and whispered a prayer that probably sounded like, "Lord, please, please let him live." And the baby's sister, Miriam, stood at a distance, watching. Not sleeping, not blinking much, just watching. Because sometimes faith looks like standing still when your heart is racing. Then royal footsteps. Pharaoh's daughter came down to the river to bathe. Servants walked beside her. The water shimmered. The reeds whispered in the breeze. And then she saw it, a basket. She had a servant fetch it. She opened it, and the baby cried. In that moment, Pharaoh's law was sitting right in front of her. A Hebrew baby boy, a child her father had condemned. And the princess knew exactly what he was. She said, "This is one of the Hebrew children." But her heart was moved. And from the shadows, Miriam stepped forward. She didn't demand, she didn't accuse, she didn't panic. She simply offered a solution, quick, brave, and wise. Miriam asked, "Shall I go and call a nurse from the Hebrew women to nurse the child for you?" The princess nodded. And so, by God's providence, the baby was returned to his own mother. Can you imagine that? The very child she had to release was placed back into her arms. Not as a hunted baby in the shadows, but with royal protection. Pharaoh's daughter told her, "Take this child away and nurse him for me, and I will give you your wages." The mother of Moses got paid to raise her own son, by Pharaoh's house, under Pharaoh's nose. That is the kind of irony God sometimes writes into history. When the boy grew older, his mother brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. He was raised in the palace, surrounded by wealth and power, learning the ways of Egypt, walking halls his people could never enter. And Pharaoh's daughter gave him a name, Moses. She said, "Because I drew him out of the water." Moses grew up in two worlds. He was Hebrew by birth, but Egyptian by upbringing. And as he became a man, he began to notice something he could never ignore. His people, the Hebrews, were still slaves. One day, Moses went out and saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew slave. Moses looked this way and that, and when he saw no one, he struck the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. But the next day, Moses found two Hebrews fighting. He tried to stop them, and one of them turned on Moses and said, "Who made you a prince and a judge over us? Do you mean to kill me as you killed the Egyptian?" Moses froze. His secret wasn't secret anymore. And soon, Pharaoh heard about it. Pharaoh wanted Moses dead, so Moses ran. He fled Egypt and ended up far away in the land of Midian. He sat down by a well, tired, alone, and no longer a prince. In Midian, Moses began a new life. He helped a family in trouble. He married Zipporah, the daughter of a priest of Midian. He became a shepherd, and the years passed. Meanwhile, back in Egypt, the Israelites groaned under slavery. They cried out, and their cry rose up to heaven. And the Bible says, God heard. God remembered his covenant. God saw, and God knew. Now we need to pause here, because that word, remembered, is important. When the Bible says God remembered, it does not mean God had ever forgotten. God does not get distracted. He does not one day look up and say, "Wait, where did the Israelites go? Oh yeah, they are in Egypt. I forgot I left them there." In the Bible, God remembered means God is about to move from promise to action. It's a signal flare in the story. It means the waiting is not invisible, and it will not last forever. God heard their cries. God saw their suffering. God knew exactly what was happening. And now, God was about to act. One day, while Moses was tending sheep in the wilderness, he saw something that didn't make sense. A bush was on fire, but it was not burning up. Before we finish, let's add a quick side story, because this moment with the burning bush teaches us something we'll see again and again. Think of the Bible like one big, long story. And in good stories, writers use motifs. A motif is a fancy writing word that means a clue that shows up again and again, so you learn to recognize it. One motif we're going to watch for is this. God's presence is often marked by fire. Here, it is a bush that burns without being consumed. Later, God's glory will appear with blazing brightness. And in the New Testament, the Spirit comes with what looks like tongues of fire at Pentecost. So, when fire appears around God's presence, the Bible often expects you to notice. Moses turned aside to investigate, and from the flame, God called his name. "Moses, Moses." Moses stopped cold. The desert wind still moved. The sheep still shifted behind him. But Moses suddenly felt like the whole world had gone quiet, like creation itself was listening. And Moses answered the only way anyone can answer when God speaks. "Here I am." Then God said something unexpected, something Moses would never forget. The Lord said, "Do not come any closer. Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy ground." Moses looked down at his feet. Just dusty sandals, just dry earth. But this was the first lesson God taught him. Holiness isn't about the ground being special all by itself. It's special because God is there. When the Lord draws near, ordinary places become holy places. A wilderness becomes a sanctuary. A shepherd becomes a messenger, and even sandals become part of the story. So Moses slipped them off, and he stood barefoot before the living God. God told Moses he had seen the suffering of his people. He had heard their cries, and he was coming down to rescue them. Then God said something that changed Moses' life forever. "So now, go. I am sending you to Pharaoh that you may bring my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt." What we learned, God's promises can take a long time to unfold. God had promised Abraham that his family would inherit the land of Canaan. Yet hundreds of years later, his descendants were suffering as slaves in Egypt. Even when God's promises seem slow, he is still at work behind the scenes. God sees suffering and hears the cries of his people. The Israelites may have felt forgotten, but the Bible tells us God heard, remembered, saw, and knew. Their suffering was never invisible to him. God often works through ordinary people in surprising ways. A brave mother, a watchful sister, a compassionate princess. God used each of them to protect Moses. Sometimes God's plan moves forward through small acts of courage. God prepares people long before he calls them to act. Moses grew up in Pharaoh's palace, then spent years as a shepherd in the wilderness. Those experiences would shape the leader he would become. When God is present, ordinary places become holy. A dusty wilderness became holy ground because God was there. The same God who spoke from the burning bush is still present and at work today.
Sometimes life feels unfair or confusing. You might wonder why hard things happen or why God seems slow to act.
The story of Moses reminds us that even when we cannot see what God is doing, he is still working. The Israelites cried out for help, and God heard every word. He had not forgotten them. God also loves to work through ordinary people. Moses did not feel like a hero. He was a shepherd in the wilderness when God called him. But God often begins big rescue stories by asking someone to take one faithful step. When you listen for God, trust him, and obey even in small things, you may become part of the story he is writing. You can pray something simple like this: Lord, help me trust you even when I don't understand what is happening. Help me listen when you call, and give me courage to obey. Thanks for listening to Nate's Bible Stories, written and read by Nate Harris. Free to share with attribution, not for resale.
Thy word is a lamp unto my feet, and a light unto my path.
The grass withers, the flower faints, but the word of our God will stand forever.